Annette Oltmans of the MEND Project trademarked a term called double abuse. And I want to explain to you what that is. Double abuse is a secondary form of abuse which occurs when victims reach out for help or share their experience and are not believed, are minimized, are ignored, given unwanted or incorrect instructions, are criticized, interrogated, judged, or shunned by an individual or an organization that is responding to the person who is describing their abuse. So it's basically how the person who is hearing about the abuse is responding to the victim and responding in such a way that it is actually abusing the victim even more. Now, Annette, who has I've interviewed her on one of my podcasts, and I've actually put it also up on YouTube, describes her experience with double abuse as actually more painful to endure than the abuse itself in her marriage. So, what are some forms of double abuse? One of those is offering scriptural pat answers to a victim, to a person who is being abused. You just say, oh, God will take care of you. Or you say, well, you need to submit to your husband. If you submit, it will be fine. Or God's going to bless you for this. Or you just need to keep trusting God and keep submitting while you're waiting and trusting God. So it's coming up with, or let Jesus be your husband to a woman who is being abused in a marriage. So in other words, you don't need your husband, just let Jesus be your husband. Or to a man, just love your wife, just keep loving her. And or to a child, an adult child or a child, oh, just keep respecting your parents. They're your authority. You have to submit to them. You keep honoring your parents. In other words, just keep doing that and keep enduring the abuse. So that by telling a person to continue doing that, you're saying, I agree with your abuser, that you are going to continue to be abused. I'm not going to say anything that validates you or agrees with you that this is not okay. I'm not going to help you. I'm just going to say, oh, yeah, okay, just keep enduring, keep going along with it. Second one is overlooking the abuse due to either misunderstanding or ignorance. And you know how people will say it's like not knowing the law does not make you innocent when you break a law. Sometimes you're just supposed to either know it or you are supposed to know what is right and what is wrong. Well, churches are historically and Christians are historically not good at understanding what is abuse and what isn't abuse. And so they have a tendency to be misinformed. And so to say things or respond in a way out of that ignorance that is hurtful to people, and basically kind of like saying, well, this is a marriage problem. Both of you have problems. Both of you are part of the problem, not recognizing that the description that they just heard is abuse. And by saying both of you are part of the problem, or it takes two to make a marriage work, or it takes two to not make a marriage work, or just take care of your part, that you are actually condoning abuse and condoning the person to continue to endure the abuse. You're overlooking it, not purposefully, but because you're ignorant of it. There are certain positions in the church that where they need to be informed as to what abuse is. And what I love about the MEND Project and about Annette is that is the whole purpose of the MEND Project, is to provide this training to churches, individuals, and organizations that are first responders to abuse victims so that they know how to recognize abuse, especially covert emotional abuse, which is not as easy to see as somebody that has bruises on their body from being physically hurt. The next one is minimizing of the verbal or the emotional abuse as less than physical abuse. And this is said in the church a lot. I cringe anytime I hear this. Well, if you're being physically abused, you can leave. you can separate. What are you saying when you say that? The person is saying, if you're being physically abused, that's bad. But if you're being emotionally abused or verbally abused, that's not so bad. You can't leave. You have to stay. So that is literally saying that verbal and emotional abuse is less harmful than physical abuse, which is not true. It is not. In many ways, it's more harmful, more crazy making. So it is definitely abusive to say to an emotional or verbal abuse victim, it's not so bad. It's not, at least you're not being hit. And people have actually had that said to them. Imagine saying to someone, at least you're not being hit. That's what you're saying. At least it's not physical. If it's physical, you can protect yourself and go. But if it's not, sorry. Okay. Next one, imposing consequences for separating or divorcing an abuser or setting boundaries with an abuser. Like what? Like you can no longer head this ministry. You can no longer be in this job. You can no longer be a part of this couples ministry. You can no longer have this life group in your home. You can no longer teach in this church. Those things are consequences. And basically to saying, if you divorce or you leave or separate from an abusive person, you're going to pay a price. We're going to punish you because we don't understand that abuse is not okay. And we don't recognize that it's okay to leave an abusive relationship. We're going to impose a consequences. Okay. And that is not okay. And that is abusive. Imagine an abuse victim who it takes tremendous amount of courage and strength and a long time to get to the place where you can say, I'm going to separate from this abusive person. And then the church comes in and says, well, you're going to lose your job, or you're going to have to step down from this study as a leader, or we're not going to allow you to continue to have this life group in your home. That is abusive to this abuse victim and very harmful. The next one is judging the victim's behavior, whether they're staying, they're leaving, they're reacting, they're tolerating. To literally judge. Judge means to condemn. So you're saying to this victim, I'm condemning your behavior. Often, again, comes from not understanding why the person is doing what the person is doing. And basically you're saying, okay, so you're separating, or you're setting this boundary, or you're stopping couples therapy and refusing to continue with seeing the pastor or seeing the marriage ministry leader or your couple mentoring couple. You're refusing to do this. That's not okay. Judging the person's choice because the person thinking that the person is wrong. Again, damaging to the abuse victim because you're saying you're wrong. I don't support what you're doing. What you're doing is wrong. And judging hurts. When you're already being abused and somebody is judging you, it can just be the thing that just takes all your strength and resolve away. It's really difficult to endure. It takes a lot to stand up to an abuser and somebody else who doesn't understand what you're doing and is condemning you. And just a note here, people sometimes judge the abuse victim because the abuse victim doesn't have the strength yet to leave. And they might say something like, well, if it was really that bad, why are you still there? Like, why are you still there? Again, not getting it. Abuse victims really struggle with getting strong enough to leave an abuser. They're continually pushed down and beat down, and things are said to them that causes them to doubt themselves. And it takes a whole lot of work to get to the place where you know that this is not okay and you're not going to stay. So when you say that to someone, you're basically saying, oh, it's not that bad. Like if it was, you'd leave. Hurts. That's abusive to that abuse victim. The next one is assigning mutual blame for marital problems. So you're seeing this couple in therapy maybe, or you're, ministering to them, or you're a mentor couple, and you're looking at them like it's both of them. And so you're saying, okay, it takes two. So I'm going to give you half the blame and you half the blame. So seeing them together and actually working with them, and I'm going to do a video that it goes into this further, but actually seeing them together and giving them both part of the blame is actually abusing the victim and is supporting the abuser's view of the relationship, because abusers tell victims, I wouldn't do this if you didn't do what you were doing. It's your fault I'm doing this. So that is just going along with the abuser's belief that it's the victim's fault. The next one is giving passive approval of the abuser by continuing to have a relationship with the abuser once you know of the abuse that doesn't confront it. So it's basically, okay, I know you're abusive, but let's go play golf. I know about your abuse, but I'll continue to work with you and give you this high position in the church and let you do this, and not call you out on the abuse and hold you accountable. So if you don't confront the abuse, once you know that the person is an abuser, you are colluding with the abuser against the victim and not supporting the victim. So once you know about the abuse, you have to support the victim, not the abuser. And if you don't support the victim by confronting the abuse and holding the abuser liable and accountable, then you are hurting the abuse victim even more. You're basically engaging in double abuse. The next one is to support the original abuse inadvertently or intentionally from unconscious bias. I'm going to say that again: supporting the original abuse inadvertently or intentionally from unconscious bias. And what is that? Well, in the church, we have a lot of unconscious bias or even conscious bias because we believe man should be the head of the house, the wife needs to submit. So if your viewpoint is, okay, well, the wife needs to submit because the man is the head of the house, the man is the authority, the man gets to make the decisions, the man is responsible for the decisions, so he gets to make them. So without realizing it, when a wife complains to you about something that her husband is doing, or a child complains about something a parent is doing, you basically, your bias is toward that wife or that child needing to submit. And so you respond from that place. Well, the man is the head of the household. Well, you only need to submit. You need to submit. You need to obey your parents. You need to submit to your husband because that's what God's called you to do. So you may not recognize that that's actually a bias that is abusing the victim. Because again, you're seeing this in a particular way. And because of that, you're missing out on the fact that this is abuse that you need to make a stand for, an abuse that you need to address, and that you need to support the victim. You need to help the victim. You need to validate the victim rather than saying these things that, again, further abuse. The next one is covering up the abuse to save the abuser's reputation or to avoid the fallout. Does this happen? Absolutely. Where does it happen? It happens if the abuser is your friend. It happens if the abuser is in your business, is working there, and you don't want to have any of the fallout, or if the abuser is a staff member of a church or a pastor or somebody who, by exposing this, is going to hurt that person's reputation or hurt your ministry or hurt your church or hurt the organization. And you don't want to have to deal with it. You don't want to bear it. You don't want to pay the price. So you cover it up and you do it purposefully. And what do you do when you do that? You're a co-conspirator. You are somebody who is going along with the abuse and is literally abusing the victim more by covering it up. You're actively covering it up. Not right, not what Jesus would have done. And then the next one is justifying the abuse with institutional bias. And this is similar to supporting it from unconscious bias. This again is basically saying it's okay for a husband to abuse his wife. It's okay for a husband to tell her what to do. It's okay for a husband to control you because the husband is the head of the family. It's okay for your parent to take all of those things away from you, or your parent to tell you what to do, or to tell your parent to tell you what not to do, because your parent is your parent. Or the belief that maybe a female, as long as she is not married, is under the covering of her parents and has to do whatever her parents tell her to do. So all of these things, which are ways that people can actually double abuse a victim, an abuse victim, are things that we need to watch out in the church. We need to watch out for these. We need to recognize that there is a responsibility, especially in people that work in the church, in law enforcement, as Annette explains, as people that are ministry leaders, who people will be coming to them and telling them about the relationship problems, to get training to recognize what is abuse, and especially the abuse that's most difficult to recognize, which is that covert emotional abuse, which is kind of hidden. It's not name calling. People recognize somebody screams at you, swears at you, and calls you name. That's, abusive. But this is more covert. These are the things that are harder to identify. They're the more passive things, things that the person is doing to take away a person's power and to undermine the person and to minimize the person. Those are things that we need training to recognize. Those we need to understand abusive relationships and what those are. So I would just recommend that if you're struggling with this, check out the Mend Project at themendproject.com, and that you would learn some more about emotional abuse and get to this point where you're not double abusing abuse victims that come to you. So thank you for watching this video, and I would just hope you'll watch other ones. I hope that you'll learn and get trained and better able to respond. And maybe you're just a friend or a family member of somebody who's in an abusive relationship. All of us need to respond in the right way to people who come to us when they are victims of abuse. Thank you.